So it is 2:05, so we'll get this started. I'd just like to welcome everybody here to the InfoSec BC, or Vancouver Security Special Interest Group meeting. I had the privilege of introducing Dr. Linda Miller. Welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to come and bring us a talk. So I'm going to go through a little bit of her bio. So she is and I'll use the term veteran because anyone that's been in this industry for 20 plus years is really considered a veteran in this space. I've lost all my hair, you see. Part of Dr. Miller's background, she sought to humanize how technology is implemented in public and private corporations. Her pursuit has led her to a PhD in spiritual psychology. There's going to be some good stories behind that one. Postgraduate work in executive coaching, multiple certifications in running successful strategic change initiatives. And she has a range of experience from government, IT government practices to corporate restructuring to consortiums. I said this, she's done the gambit of it. Clients included insurance companies, banking institutions, municipal, provincial governments, mobility technology providers, and law firms. In 2008, Dr. Miller saw the need for new business tools, techniques, and measurements models that equip leaders and teams to thrive in high speed, high complexity, and highly ambitious contexts that have become the norm. And over the 7 years of her master's in doctoral research, she developed a framework and methods for practices that enable corporations to be successful in technology-driven radical change and build the capabilities to continuously transform. She's got courses, advisory services, and published works that has helped transform organizations across Canada and around the world. So Dr. Miller, thank you so much for coming. We are looking forward to your talk, and I will let you introduce and go from there. So thank you so much.
It sounds marginally scary, all of that. I might add to that my first gig in IT was in 1978, and then sort of let you ponder on that as I move into this presentation today. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having me here today. Today I'm going to talk about 7 mindset shifts for success in the digital world. In recent years, there's been an acknowledgement that the granularity and nature of common data sets needs new kinds of attention. Exponentially expanding good and bad ways that data and information might be used, as expansive as human nature itself, has triggered new national and international standards in everything from privacy to transparency of financial reporting. But fundamental thinking hasn't necessarily evolved. The environment and the orientation of systems and data management has historically had difficulty maturing to all that is truly needed to position the organization for future success. Although everyone is starting to talk about data and information and even starting to love data in particular, this wasn't always the case, and we're seeing the effects of decades of marginalized and investment-starved information technology on all fronts. And what this means is that some very difficult conversations are being had. And with the onset of artificial intelligence, some very different conversations are being had. So I hope this presentation will provide you with new ways of looking at your work and provide you with new tools and language to take into your conversations with your employees, your employers, and your clients. Because following the phrase of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the radical change has already happened, and now it's time to change how we think, what we believe and value, and the structure of our work to support it. So today, we're going to talk about shifting mindsets and narratives towards strategies that work in the coming hyper-digital age. And what we're talking about today applies to anything pertaining to thriving in the digital world. As IT people, we understand the expansiveness of possibility associated with technology, but most disciplines don't necessarily think that way. And a large part of what is emerging as a new age in business has to do with this expansive mindset. So in the first 30 minutes, we'll talk about these first 4 mindset shifts together. And then we'll do an exercise in breakout rooms combined with a break. And then when we're back, we'll briefly review what happened in those breakout rooms and do the last 3 mindsets in the remaining sort of 20 minutes before Q&A. Humanization in business is the new reality. Now you can think of this shift as a result of the shift in power from the few to the many through social media. Or you can think of this as an uptake of the climate crisis as a new business opportunity. Or you can think of it as a stewardship response to the shrinking of planetary resources. But regardless, there are 2 facts about this movement. One, it's possible because of information technology and the masses of digitized information available and the processing power to channel it and interpret it. And 2, its implications go deep into the psyche of business and commerce, removing 200 years of conquer mindset and replacing that with care-oriented thinking. Although most organizations are trying to make a gentle move between these opposing ideologies, both ideologies can't be served at the same time without consequence. More than that, in order to succeed in business as it is today around the world, success strategies of the past must be replaced with ones that serve this opposite sensibilities of the new age we're living in. An age that is dramatically expanding day to day. A large part of these success strategies have to do with honoring the ways in which personal and corporate data is collected, used, shared, and managed. So here we have a very brief view of the conquer ideology that preceded and underpinned the past 200 years of the industrial age. These old ways are in fact hindering efforts to go digital and have been for some time. This isn't news to anyone, but what's commonly misunderstood is the depth organizations must go to reduce and eliminate them. So not only so that success in digital initiatives can happen, but in order to tap into untapped human and technology capital in ways that create the kind of foundation needed for digital business operations to go to the next level. So far, efforts to address this condition have not gone far enough, fast enough. And so organizations, leaders, teams, individuals find themselves wading through a bog of dialogue that sort of misses the point, and work relationships that are more or less misaligned. But in order to truly take an active, structured approach in dismantling this industrial age thinking, as I call it, needs to first be defined and then compared with a clear and practical definition of the new age we're trying to move into. And so with these 35 years of information technology experience behind me and a good deal of research, I defined 3 constructs for the purposes of getting down to the from and to states companies around the globe are trying to move between. And as I created these constructs, I realized something that should have been obvious. That in the scheme of things, the information age turns out to be a conduit and not just a tool set and enablement, but also between ways of thinking, succeeding, operating of the past and the still emerging ways and means of the new age. I titled this age construct the Millennium Age, since its origin point was at the turn of the millennium in the dot-com era. Now, what is obvious but not really well understood here is that you can't get into this new millennium age without thoroughly passing through the information age. Most companies thought they were fully immersed in an information age only to find out that decades of half-baked solutions and risk management IT investments have resulted in a shadow of modernization, largely insufficient to build upon. And they found that data sets diligently captured by those partial solutions are in fact partial themselves, ultimately leaving the organization right where they aim to be, safe in the industrial age of sameness and largely uninformed controls. To date, IT applications and data management are starved and marginalized, leaving many organizations in this setback position with a new age already upon us. From a tools and efficiency standpoint, and also from a thinking and mindset standpoint, unless the company has adopted and passed through the information age described lightly here, it cannot become a viable millennium age company. Steps cannot be skipped, money must be spent, and people must be supported now. To bring this into focus, just make sure I got that. Here is where most companies are even after the jolt forward by the pandemic. The amount of work to do has been vastly underestimated, and when attempting to use the old ways, not surprisingly, produces partial success or in many cases, a backsliding. Now take a moment to notice the dramatic shift in language here. We're going to be using new words to describe our work, our thinking, our relationships, and our structures going forward. So with these definitions in hand, it's possible to measure formally and socially where people and organizations are at, how distant they are from having a viable position or foothold in the millennium age. Now, this set of shorthand shifts shown here can be used in every situation to guide the dialogue, tools selections, activities, focus of work, and language that promotes success. When we begin to think of transformation as a continuous life cycle occurring every 2 or 3 years, in the same way process improvement was viewed in the 90s and into the new millennium, the need for speed in adapting is palpable. And it's this combination of speed, constancy, and widening gaps that is the recipe for operational and human breakdowns. Now, industrial age thinking is so completely opposite of what is needed to succeed in the hyper-digital world that breakdowns are not only guaranteed, they are profoundly necessary. And it's not going to happen by itself. Industrial age thinking and methods are so deeply ingrained after 200 years that a concerted effort must be made to uproot the beliefs and values they're founded in and consciously invert them. I often say, think of what you should do or what you would have done 10 years ago and do the opposite in order to not only behave in the new ways conducive to success, but frame and execute the transformations you're undertaking themselves. So it's this people first before money and relationships first before performance and achievement and learning as the priority over repeated success that we're really getting to here. This is the foundation of the term inverted success factors that you may have seen talked about by the Big Four and also, of course, in my books and materials. It's a fundamental piece. The script must be flipped in the dialogue, in the minds of people, and also in the dialogue between people in order for data in particular to be healthy and supportive of the new ways of being connected, and the new ways of automating work, and the new ways of delivering intelligence into business functions. Only by doing this can we focus on allowing access and connecting people with just the data and information they need, and co-creating the structures and systems that keep pace with oncoming radical change in the world, ultimately to focus on what is wanted rather than what is not wanted. Now, a whole new kind of leadership is required to support the shifts we're talking about. And also, radical change is repeating at an escalating speed. A kind of leadership that everyone practices, not just people who have direct reports. To shed the old ways, everyone has to lead themselves and those around them. particularly through these tearing paradoxes of trying to meet both of these polarized demands and ideologies, while at the same time working to make the leap into the new ways of thinking and working. No single leader or team of leaders can accomplish this, and in fact, most senior people in the company may be in the worst position to direct this, since their investment in the old ways is deep and large. Leadership and insight is needed each and every day under these conditions, and revolves around the ability to embrace breakdowns and convert them into breakthroughs despite high levels of ambiguity and complexity. The strain that I've just described underlies the radical nature of digital transformation and surrounds it. Now, there are two kinds of breakdowns that are evident in what we've talked about so far. The first, a deliberate breaking down of old structures, old ways of working as a matter of reshaping the organization into the modern shape. And second, disruptive breakdowns caused by the speed of making those changes, but more than that, caused by the tearing effect of polarized belief systems. Both ends of the continuum between industrial age and the millennium age must be served, even though this is impossible, and this will inevitably cause breakdowns in people, breakdowns in relationship in large numbers, and great magnitude. It is at this juncture where breakdown management becomes a thing, a specific and discrete body of work. With tools to directly manage breakdowns and convert them into breakthroughs, the organization moves more freely and accelerates towards the thriving state in the digital world. In managing the necessary breakdowns and those that are inevitably triggered by polarized belief systems, the organization systematically removes the layers of the industrial age thinking and methods in predictable, fast, and healthy ways. In other words, it's not enough these days to just survive the breakdowns and get back on track. Breakdowns need to be invested in and converted into explicitly into breakthroughs, into the new mindsets and ways of working. Now, breakthrough solutions always use what's available in new ways, ways that serve the millennium age ideologies and negate industrial age ideologies. Breakthrough actions are always pull rather than push in nature and embody the characteristics of millennium age ideology. Now, as a simple and obvious example, let's say the organization's communication about digital transformation initiatives is breaking down under the volume and need for speed as it goes through the chain of command and what is referred to as a cascade channel. Adding to this, things are very hard to find on the intranet when people try to self-serve. Now, in managing this breakdown, the breakthrough action isn't hire more people to do communication or do a town hall or push managers to ask more of people. That response is aimed at just surviving the breakdown and matches the characteristics of the industrial age here on the left. The breakthrough requires a leap into the future. So in this example, the breakthrough might be to ignite more replete use of user set interest mechanisms in Google Suite and MS Teams, or expand the use of existing public relations intelligence enabled software that serves up information in the right mix between teams and individuals based on some rules or some trends. This is a solution that matches the characteristics of the millennium age you see here on the right. There is a pattern of routinely making leaps of faith in the success strategies of the Millennium Age digital world, including the breakdown breakthrough scenario. Now, IT people may understand this well, but they're more often at the table with those who don't going forward, and this could be problematic unless everyone who can takes a leadership role. People helping people through ups and downs and switchbacks and leaps into the unknown demands a wholesale shift from transactional to transformational leadership styles. Each person who can must encourage and show those around them how to move in this dramatically new way. Transformational leadership delivers insight needed each and every day and revolves around the ability to embrace breakdowns and convert them to breakthroughs. But it also revolves around not just surviving, but thriving in ambiguity and making new things out of the murky what is. There is a language shift to observe here, affirmative and insightful, appreciative and generous. As food for thought, here are the 7 characteristics of transformational leadership as it pertains to continuous transformation and thriving in the digital world. Now, each is aligned with a location where it is found in the organization. Thought, communication, motivation, mechanisms, and the ways of working. Over the course of repeated leaps of faith into the unknown and ongoing conversation of breakdowns to breakthroughs, a kind of change intelligence is built up. More than just controlling your emotions or having a positive attitude towards change, this is the ability to rise to the multidimensional and dynamic nature of the digital world. And as you can see, even though we are dealing in soft things like appreciation and generosity, the work that's actually being done is difficult, has a degree of pain associated with it, and tremendous challenge to overcome. Now, putting this another way, you can't get from here to transformed, nor from industrial age to millennium age using transactional, performance-oriented methods. And it's simply not possible to reward or punish in a context where they're in contexts that are ridden with ambiguity. And it's simply not possible to individually perform and achieve in a competitive sense in contexts that are complex and filled with polarized demands. So you see here are 7 keys to building change intelligence for continuous transformation and thriving in the digital world. They are shown as to how they correlate to the ways people relate to their work: thought, orientation, response, where to apply effort, and elevation of work. So we're just going to, with Fred's help, we're going to move into an exercise now. And what we'll do is our moderator here, which I think is Fred, will split everyone up into groups using the Zoom breakout rooms. And you'll answer the question on the next slide and post your answers in chat. So
how many rooms?
Sorry?
How many rooms, Linda?
Depends on how many we've got. How many people do we have today?
51 participants.
Okay, so maybe 5 groups, and set in groups of 10 with 1 with 11.
All right. And we assign automatically to one of the rooms?
Yep, but just let me post the actual question that's being answered, because I think once you do that, it's going to put everybody in rooms and then they can't see what they're supposed to respond to. So yeah, you'll continue to work through the break as needed, then come back for the second half of the presentation. And so here is your question. I'll just walk through this a little bit before you go in. Try to answer the question, what industrial age mindset breakdowns, I just picked 2, associated breakthroughs are needed for data and information security and data integrity to have this status, funding, and support needed to keep pace and evolve in the world that we're coming into. And so what we're sort of angling for here is taking into account that it's usually some crisis that drives investment in or correction of data management and information security practices. Consider these things when answering how executives think, the mindset of general population, the environment from a technical and physical standpoint, the environment from a financial standpoint, and the number of times and the number of ways you need to say what is needed in order to get the right attention on data integrity and information security. So with that, I'll post this, the actual question here in chat so you have a reference and you don't sort of lose it as you go into groups. And with that, I'll let you fire away, Fred, on putting everybody in groups, and then we'll come back after the break.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So our group just discussed so 2 breakdowns and breakthroughs. So our first thought was a breakdown would be adoption of new technology for data security and integrity. So there's this executive mindset of time, like trying to have a one-size-fit-all tool. There's not enough time to make a decision. There's also like not recognizing internal needs of the company or the employees, so maybe needing multiple tools or not needing specialized tools at all. There's a sense of needing to kind of check a box, meet requirements without having a strong sense of what the employees or the companies need. Regarding, mindset of general population and general, the environment nowadays, is there is a stronger kind of data breach and reporting environment than there was now than in the past. So there's new kind of regulatory new laws that play into how a company changes how it treats its data. So I think the breakthrough is kind of trying to meet those challenges and adopting new technologies to meet those goals without just going out and buying something and just saying problem solved. The second thing we discussed as a breakdown was just recognizing a company can no longer treat their info and their security, info security or IT department the same now as in the past. So there might have been this expectation maybe in, just in the past of how, maybe the IT department could be small or wear multiple hats, or the one guy who did sysadmin could also do database admin, who could also do, information security. I think there's this breakthrough through that process of trying to improve how companies treats its internal resources and departments with this kind of mindset switch from data being like a cost sink or just a tool that the organization needs to data actually being a selling point. Because nowadays there's more of a Google or a Facebook mindset way of thinking, which is your data is actually your biggest selling feature. So you should treat it with a bigger sense of need or resources than you did in the past. There's like more sharing, there's more social media, there's more big data type reporting and analysis tools than there was, there is now than ever before. So I think that's changing how companies feel about their data and how they treat their data. I don't think we met every bullet point, but that was just briefly what we discussed in group 2.
Yeah, that's great. And that's on the way, by the way, that whole processes as a valuable asset of the corporation and data as a valuable asset of the corporation for what it's worth. Other groups that would like to share what they sort of came up with?
Yeah, this is Kevin. I can go.
Okay.
I had an esteemed group of colleagues that were brilliant in our assessment and just overwhelming the amount of intelligence in that room. So it was really, really enlightening. I feel very humbled. So the 4 things we came up with is the board of directors says, how can we avoid being in the news about ransomware? And that's a change that we've had the last couple of years. Because before that, if you look at any of the quarterly earnings, cybersecurity threats were never mentioned at all. It was always a fire in a distribution center or some type of geopolitical disruption, but we never considered a cyber attack as a risk to future earnings. And nowadays, you will see those on the risk to future earnings on any quarterly earnings statement.
Yeah.
And so how can we avoid being in the news about ransomware? That's what they're asking. And generally the board of directors, if they're sitting there and we're concerned and we're honest about where we are in our posture, probably funds will come our way. Change in mindset. This was a really good one that we came up with, is that it's okay now to try something new and fail, but fail fast. And in the earlier days, like at the end of the last century, we were told, no, you got to get it right the first time.
Yes.
If you fail once, you're out and you can go fail someplace else.
So true.
And that's a big change, is it in the mindset. And then I talked, this was one of my particular experiences as a consultant. I asked by a CEO, what's the minimum I can spend on cybersecurity and still be okay?
It's still there.
Well, I thought that was funny, but that is the mindset. I not quite that direct, but I hit that with a lot of clients, is that, I don't want to spend much money on cybersecurity. I have to make a profit here. And so what is the right amount? And well, the answer is it depends on your risk tolerance. And so we can define the risk of what we're spending here. Here's the minimum. Here's your NIST or ISO standards. But if you only do the standards, you're state of the art from 3 years ago, because that's how long it takes to get a change to a national standard. And that's generally not good enough. So it comes down to a risk question, is what is your risk tolerance? But I think this was what Fred brought up. He said that in the past we've been viewed as a cost center.
Yes.
And that's the fourth bullet I got is the cost center versus a revenue driver.
Yes.
And in the past we were viewed as a burden to the revenue, and nowadays we're viewed as assurances to the revenue. And if you can make it where you are more secure with your customer, and you're in an industry where being secure is important to your customer, like for instance, Bell versus Telus versus Rogers, you probably are going to go with a carrier that protects your data and protects your privacy, and you're comfortable with that. Or at least maybe that's where we're going. We'll see.
Well, and also, so I've done a lot in insurance recently. The actuarial practice of actuarial is now rallying around big data and artificial intelligence and future forward-looking predictive analytics. And so suddenly data is an asset that generates money in a whole new way.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is a question I've gotten. Have you known of any cyber insurance policy paying out?
Well, I'm sure that has happened. Yeah.
Rarely.
Sure. Yeah.
Because
sure.
they'll always find that you weren't doing the basics, therefore your negligence is on you.
It comes down to the auditor. That's funny.
It does. It comes down as, were you doing the basics that are required, that are considered the prudent level of protection? Were you doing it?
Yeah.
And if you weren't, then we don't pay.
Good. Well, that's insurance any day of the week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyhow, that's our report out. You guys on my esteemed team, do you have anything else to add?
Okay, thank you. Next
and I even said esteemed team. So okay.
Next group.
I think I'm gonna jump in here right after that, because our group came up with similar points there, Kevin, especially in terms of security being a cost center versus a something that's like a profit assurance center. It's almost industry specific in terms of which ones view it that way, because I don't think Dave Iverson was in our group, but I don't see him. May not have made it back in. But I remember this coming up a few years ago, where one of the guys in the group said his methodology for investing in companies is to watch who's got a data breach, buy them when their stock tanks, because the trend is within 18 months they're over and above what they were prior. And it's interesting because it's almost like it's industry specific. So if you look at Sony and Home Depot and a few others, their stocks are doing great now. Like they took a hit back then, but Dave's perspective on that as well was, well, if you're a financial institution, you're dealing with people's livelihood and their money and their lives. It's a little bit different than a retail company, so to speak, in that regard. And having dealt with clients over the last number of years and just seeing, I think it's still a very much ingrained pattern that it takes something bad for the wallet to still open up. Unfortunately, I think it is slowly changing. I think they're realizing that they have to put money into it, but I don't. From what I've seen from a lot of clients and a lot of things in the industry, I don't think it's quite there yet.
It'll be interesting to see how the pandemic finally comes around to that. So as everyone scrambles to get everyone online and go from WebEx to Teams and, you know, put standards around SharePoint and build up their infrastructure to get the bandwidth to do the kinds of things that need to be done for AI and robotics and machine learning to take hold and help. I mean, this is a step, order of magnitude, many orders of magnitude. And so you can't sort of look at that without coming back to the question that you just posed. You cannot do that level of processing without getting your house in order and really taking a look at how you're treating the fundamentals of information technology. Sorry, now I'm on a soapbox. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think we have 2 more groups if you're willing. Or one more group?
I guess I could go next. We actually didn't pick specific breakdowns other than looking at things from the point of view of not enough resources and not enough fundings. And we basically attacked that last point about how many times and how many ways you've gone through this. And we looked at it from the point of view of, okay, you really have to have the data available to explain what types of potential losses you would have in order to convince people that it is necessary. You don't want to wait for a crisis. You want to look at what you have now, what are your threats, what are your potential losses, you know, and actually have the data to quantify the losses to the executives so that they can then look at it from, you know, and look at different scenarios, different control potentials, and evaluate, okay, if I put this type of control for this type of threat, what, you know, how do I reduce the losses to the company, and what would that look like? So that's how we approached it. We approached it from the point of view of risk loss.
Yeah.
It's more like a risk assessment.
Yeah, but it's a quantitative risk
Yes.
assessment. And I know people hate quantitative risk assessments, but that happens to be one of my favorite things to do. So
there are lots of people. Yeah, there are lots of people in the accounting and actuarial field that I suspect will be moving into data management fairly soon. There'll be this wave of people who are recruited into IT that never thought they would be. Okay, so thank you for that. Anything else? And is there one more group that wants to share?
I don't mind doing a little bit of sharing, mainly because at least the subject that we focused on was slightly different than what other people have brought up. I would agree with the earlier person, though, that or maybe not. I would disagree with them and say that our group was the most intelligent and the most thoughtful. But you know, we'll have to have a game of chess or something later and find out. One of the things we focused on was command and control. So when we look at the past, we look at how top-down rigid structure, do as you're told, don't ask questions. There is no time for your feelings in this. You do not get a say in how the business is run. When it comes to privacy and security, that cascades directly into data access and privacy controls, where in the modern era, it is it's a top-down structure where the person at the top is the owner, and they dictate who can and can't access the information, either implicitly or explicitly. But more importantly, it is not up to the individual at their desk to tell us how they feel about whether or not a 12-character password works for them. They don't get to decide to use a 123 as their password because they feel it is a better password and easier to type. So the command and control structure is still there. You do as you do, you do as you're told, and not as you'd like to please when it comes to privacy and security and data access. So that's the kind of gist of the direction we were going, looking at the command and control structures and how they relate to the modern work within privacy and security, and how that do as you're told little piece there has been maintained throughout the years and is still relevant in our privacy controls. Thank you.
Good. So unless there's anything else anyone wants to talk about, we'll continue with the presentation. That was just wonderful to hear that dialogue from the community on the line today. Thank you so much for all your thought and effort into this. So I wanted to point out two other mindset shifts that are endemic to inverted success patterns of the modern world. This revolves around the idea that we can't just, that it all can't just be about the money anymore. The pain of straddling these two opposing ideologies just isn't worth it. The strain of transformation, one transformation after another in a continuous cycle, just isn't worth it. And the friction of working with other people who have vastly different viewpoints just isn't worth it. And that's happening a great deal more going forward. There has to be something more involved here, something more motivational, something more people can grab onto. Now, by way of example, the need for greater transparency alone has a dramatic change for most people and groups. The feeling of exposure and vulnerability needs to be justified in the minds of people, while industrial age paradigms pertaining to competition, performance, and perceived punitive responses to error and failure are still in play. We've just had that mentioned as an example a moment ago. Neither the precepts at the bottom right nor the shift in transparency described on the left can be accomplished without the combinations of meaning and purpose and relocating the source of certainty, truth, and trust. And we're going to walk through what that is in the next slide here, so it's clear what we're talking about. So working and finding success in this hyper-digital world doesn't make sense unless where people discern their certainty is intentionally shifted from reporting structures to connection between disciplines and with supporting intelligence around it. And not unless trust can be placed in fully synchronous dialogue about really difficult things, rather than sort of this one-way asynchronous conveyance of information through documents in databases. Nor unless the source of truth is not just an institution, but is resident in the individual's unique context from moment to moment as priorities shift and unknowns become knowns. Now, this sounds like a tall order, but from what my experience has been in the last few years, this is where the world is going, the second round of flattening of the organization. Now, there's a reciprocal relationship between meaning and purpose and these new locations of certainty, trust, and truth. That is, excuse me, without the deeper context of meaning and purpose, the hour-to-hour, day-to-day discernments to do what's right now before contexts change, and the deeper personal investments needed to navigate the challenges that we're facing likely won't be made. And most organizations are sort of teetering on the precipice of how they regard their senior leadership, the relationships in sort of this vertical structures of the organization. Now, all of this goes before the need to be in co-creation mode at all times and not just sometimes or at certain points of an initiative, for instance. Successfully moving in the digital world means interdisciplinary, cross-functional, multi-dimensional, multi-layer co-creation as the routine is needed and not the exception. And you hear a lot about this going around, but this is, I think, a kingpin in how to succeed going forward. And it is data and new technologies that will pave the way for co-creation to occur with speed, so you're not getting bogged down in all the various perspectives. But at the same time, data management should be the first through this particular wall in applying co-creation modes of work, excuse me, and ways of working. The sharing of vast data sets, their health and positioning for future movements calls for something more than linear or one-dimensional collaboration as it is currently conducted. It's quite simply too slow and yields too shallow an outcome. The future is very much now in so many ways, and organizations that are looking to future methods and the horizon of radical change all the time, will survive and thrive and subsume those that don't do that. There is a need to get unstuck from past singular skilled, stop check, and boundaried work processing. But as we've already discussed, it's as if some part of the human collective psyche hasn't accepted that the world is round and not flat. So much of our ways of doing business are linear, but the world is in fact round, and the things that are real in it are three-dimensional and not two. Moving into the future, our business processes, tools, skill sets, dialogue, and relationships are multidimensional and dynamic. Everyone is at the table, particularly where data management and data integrity is concerned. As automation lifts the burden of low complexity, low value work and frees people to apply all of their efforts and their minds to complex and strategic matters, everyone elevates. And that's the point of going digital. It's always been the point of information technology, to free people to do more and be more. And that brings me to the close of the material today. I think we've got some time, Fred, to do question and answer at this stage. I'm just checking the time, it's 3:40 now. So I think we've got a good 10 to 15 minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
So we'll open up Q&A.
Hey, I got to say, this is pretty cool having the breakout session. We've never done that before. And other than the logistics of us figuring it all out, I think that was really good, having those discussions. I think this is a good format. So, Linda, thank you for your help.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, absolutely.
And Linda, you have an accent that's not Canadian. Where are you from?
No, I am most definitely Canadian.
Are you from?
Oh, Kevin.
Are you from the Maritimes or something? Where are you from?
No, I'm not sure how people say that. I'm not sure how that I've traveled a lot across Canada. And so you have that, that time where you need to mold yourself to communicate a little bit when in Rome. So that may be it. It could be that I'm first generation Canadian from European parents, and there's some of that lilt in there. I don't know the answer, but
that's probably the answer. Okay, that was just my curiosity.
So Linda, maybe just a question on from your perspective and having worked with a lot of different companies in different spaces, who do you currently see as the leaders in what you in this whole transformation perspective? Like, if you had to go and pick a few companies to say, you know what, these are the companies that are early on the path, and kind of say this is what they're doing right. And
don't say Meta. It's not. I don't want to call that transformational, please. I just read an article about how people were spending billions on virtual real estate. Like,
this is nothing new, you know.
Yeah.
By beachfront in Saskatchewan, that's always been
Exactly.
a big joke, right? Before there was anything digital, to buy that is real. Is in the world of we deal in things that are not real, that are wisps, and yet it drives, like money. Data drives everything, and technology drives everything. To answer the question, you know, I think banking is about 15 years ahead. They are taking this very, very seriously. I was on the first online banking platforms as it happens. And where their data management is concerned and where their platforms are concerned, they're ahead. But there's always a risk in that as soon as you sort of achieve that plateau of, oh, wow, we've got a hold of it, then there's always something new coming along. So it's dangerous to say, answer to your question truthfully. And it's really hard to tell now that the pandemic has sort of ripped through all of previous thinking on what should happen with infrastructure, information technology infrastructure as a whole, as it supports the organization. Places I've been, you know, impressed with is my time at TELUS, where they really just bought everything early and then just kind of put it out there for people to use or not. And you know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but they at least are trying, always trying something new. VanSecSIG in the old days used to be on the cusp of you know, every new technology that there was, and including interact switching and you know, flash payments and that sort of thing, and prepaid credit cards. They were decades ahead of everyone else, but I don't think they are anymore. So it's a roundabout answer to your question. The insurance companies are having to come up. The finance industry and the investment industry is having to come up huge steps just because of the standards in transparency and detail of financial reporting that puts the depth of their data collection and how the volumes of data that they work with and the granularity of data that they work with. It has to be there now, and so it is. I would say that mining is doing wonderful things, perhaps as a bit of a shtick, if you will, to get more investment. So they're moving into robotics for their mining equipment. And those are the things that I'm seeing. But by and large, I mean, I don't see everything, of course. It's just my experience. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
to your point about TELUS and buying up everything, I was just going to say that relates. I felt like that was very relatable, as my company was just bought out, and it felt like that was the only moment that the company decided to change any of its IT practices was the parent company came in and just decided that we're wiping out all your current practices. So I'm sure that happens with quite a lot of smaller companies.
Yeah, the fact that, you know, there's a win and a loss here in the fact that IT's always been about bubblegum and Band-Aids, is that you can change that really quickly, as opposed to having things so set and nailed down or bolted down. I'm not sure if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Someone's more comfortable typing a question in the chat. We are monitoring it, so I haven't seen anything come up there yet, but
I haven't seen anything yet. Yeah.
questions, comments? Go ahead.
Well, actually, I had a quick thought on this, and it's just with the way that the pandemic came about. One of the things that I had noticed where I was at in critical infrastructure water was a lot of our engineers wanted to work off hours and basically on their own, and that kept getting shut down pretty much until the pandemic hit. Because management, unless you were sitting there at your desk, you weren't working. And I think that shift when everybody had to, go to working from home, I think that changed a lot of the attitude toward it. Now the question is going to be is what is going to happen, once this pandemic's over? Is management going to still stick with the old ways of no, everybody's got to be in the office, or are they going to start trusting their workers more?
Ooh,
That is definitely out of the bag. Hey, so my take on that, after all of these decades of hoping that this expansiveness and this moving beyond distance and time actually happens. I mean, you can be a coder. I was a coder for a while, and you sort of get the hang of being in this formless space, and you want the rest of the world to join you in that expansiveness because of the possibilities and how things can just move freely. But I feel like, no, I can be proven wrong, but I feel like you cannot put this one back in the box. I don't know if that helps.
I can tell you my experience is that it's not working from home, it's working from anywhere. And we're hiring people in Argentina.
Yeah.
Same time zone, skilled force. They work for about 2/3 of what a North American person would make. And so I think working from anywhere is, if you can hire a global workforce, you're going to.
So again, I've just been a bit in the trenches in capital F finance and investment for a time. And the matter at hand is not control over people as much as it is taxation. So where there are physical offices, and recently there was that law of paying international taxes in the country where you have an office, as opposed to having that be swimming around somewhere in the Cayman Islands, for instance, and offshore. So that was a huge turning. That got my attention in a really big way when it comes to working from home and the practicality of it, and the doors that it opens for labor, as you've just mentioned, but also completely upheaving the entire tax avoidance and tax management structure in most companies, especially those that are investment driven.
And I think that differs also from place to place. When I talk to my colleagues in the UK, it's a kind of amazing that when I tell them that, for me, example, I'm still working from home and stuff, they've switched to gone back to the office 3 months ago. Like, they were ordered to go back to the office. They had no choice. They were told, like, if you want to work from home, you can work 1 day a week maximum. But then we expect you at the office. And I was like, really? Like, why is that? He said, well, some companies were saying, well, they noticed the quality got degraded, the quality of the work, not the quantity of work. Work is measured by quantity and quality, and to some organizations, the quality started deteriorated when the pandemic hit and people were working from home, obviously, and there were communication issues and people not liaising with people not talking to people, and therefore targets were missed, or something was broken and not fixed in time. So
it sounds like a bit of an excuse to me, because really a pandemic had just hit.
Yeah.
And people were moving to home to work, and that takes time to make an adjustment. So there is going to naturally be
an impact. Yeah.
I'm going to say, having been a manager of people for like most of my career, I would say that the quality of your work is not really related to where you work.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that says about the person more than it does the location.
So to add to what Robert just said, actually, I had a conversation with a very close friend of mine, an engineer with the Department of Transportation with the state of Maryland. And they were ordered to go to work, a couple of months ago. So I actually wanted to understand why was that? Because for him, actually, the office, the productivity actually goes down because people just come into your office and start talking. So I was like, what was the justification? And he could not come up with an answer. So it's like people are going back, not necessarily for any reasons. And I think it's kind of, tradition. You need to be in the office. And some of this, especially in government departments, because he was like, I get to the office, he's an engineer, with the Department of Transportation. And for the most part, he takes his truck and is going onto the, onto the site where they're building a bridge or a road. So why do you have to come to the office? So a lot of organizations, especially government, are actually, mandating people to come back to the office, apparently.
If I could just say something here as well, from my own experience, there are pros and cons to this kind of thing. Certainly, it's become evident to us that the work from home has provided a fulcrum around which you can tell whether or not the people that are working from you are trustworthy or not. We don't want people who are not trustworthy working from us. I don't actually want them in the office. What I want is to filter out the people who can't work from home. And those people who can work from home, they can work from the home or the office. I don't actually care at that point. But what it did do was highlight those people who are actually not really working at work either, because it's become evident once they're at home that they're not doing any work. So it is a way for businesses, if they look at it as an opportunity, to find out who are your core workers, find out who is dedicated to your work, rather than insisting everyone comes in, utilize this project, or whatever we want to call it, to realign the way you treat certain workers, realign your thoughts around who are your core people and who's going to be getting a pay rise next year, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Interesting. Anything else before I'm just looking at the time. There's about 8 minutes left in today's 2-hour block, if I'm not mistaken, Fred. So if there's anything else, I'm happy to answer it.
I did have one other additional thought, and that's, coming from critical infrastructure water, we have a certain group of staff who absolutely under no conditions can work from home. And that managerial balance between how they feel about the people who are working from home is something that management's really got to handle very carefully, because there's a lot of, shall we say, bitterness and division.
Yeah. It's not going to be over anytime soon.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Compliment, student. Well, terrific. Well, okay. Well, I will end up closing the meeting off. Linda, a fantastic thank you from myself and from the group. Really, really appreciate your time, your insight. Super relevant topic, especially for, I think part of it is really interesting because I'm sure you, having done as much research on this, and then I don't know, all of a sudden seeing the pandemic, it's like a time warp switch for the transition for a lot of companies, and it's got to be super interesting for you to go, wow, this is like, I've researched this, and now all of a sudden I'm getting to see this and fast forward. So it's got to be really cool, and this has been fantastic. Really, really appreciate it. And appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us. It's fantastic. We appreciate you showing up and participating, and have yourself a great Friday and a very safe weekend.
Thank you all. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Well,
Peaceful weekend.
Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Take care, everyone.